The tiering system in competitive singles is pretty cool in my opinion, and because of it, there are specific formats where Pokemon like Cramorant and Dipplin can be top tier choices. There are many different formats you can choose from where completely new and fresh Pokemon are viable, making for some fun variety. It can often feel like competitive Pokemon leans towards the absolute best of the best, and much of the Pokédex is just useless and never seen. So having formats where less powerful Pokemon have a place to exist is welcome. Within this system, Pokemon are placed into tiers based on their usage. Overused is the home of the most popular competitive Pokemon in the game. Right below that there's Underused, where everything OU and above is banned. And there are many tiers even below this, all the way down to Zero Used, which is where Cramorant becomes a force to be reckoned with. But sometimes there are certain Pokemon that get stuck in the middle of these usage tiers. They find themselves too powerful to be allowed in a lower tier, but not good enough to be popular in a higher tier. These are the borderline Pokemon, and they are stuck in a bit of a competitive limbo. Even though Dipplin isn't very powerful compared to the majority of other Pokemon, at least it does have ZU, where it's a relevant presence. It has a home where it can exist. But something like Ceruledge is awkwardly stuck in RUBL, the middle point between rarely used and underused, and it is not commonly seen in competitive play as a result. There are 12 Pokemon currently ranked in UUBL, too powerful for underused but not quite popular enough to earn a position in overused. These UUBL Pokemon aren't always terrible options in OU. They do sometimes find niche uses for themselves, and if metagame shifts are kind, sometimes they can even rise up to becoming OU officially. But many of them do feel competitively unviable in the format, outclassed by other options, or just a bit too weak to function. Let's take a look at all 12 of these UUBL Pokemon in order of least viable to most viable, and maybe figure out why exactly they are stuck in this limbo, and what they offer to the OU format, if anything. The Horse Council merchandise is only available for 2 more days. Check out jimothycool.com if you're interested. Thank you. The worst of these BL ranked Pokemon would probably be Galarian Moltres. It's kind of unfortunate because this is a really cool Pokemon. This guy ended up getting banned from UU, it was too powerful there, but in OU, this isn't the best. It's having a lot of problems. The ability Berserk sounds quite good. This Pokemon gets a special attack raise at half HP or less, but something unfortunate about this is it only activates when you get attacked into this range. You can't actually substitute into this range to achieve the boost, which is really limiting. So they have to specifically play into it, and that's a conditional thing that's unfortunate. And you're really relying on this special attack boost as well, because the Pokemon only has base 100 special attack. It's not a very immediately threatening Pokemon. It can be threatening with Berserk and Nasty Plot setup and Agility setup, but that's a lot to ask. It has great stats, but it's vulnerable to a lot. It's very hard to get going, and it's even not too difficult to wall. A simple unaware Clodsire will deal with this. And what's unfortunate is Darkrai exists. Not only is Darkrai doing this Pokemon's job way better, way more immediately threatening, better coverage too for the format, also has Nasty Plot, but a lot of Pokemon are trying to check Darkrai in this format, and anything that checks Darkrai will also easily check Galarian Moltres. So it's not exactly filling a unique offensive profile that is going to catch teams off guard, because they're already trying to cover Darkrai, a similar Dark-type special threat. So it's regrettable, isn't it? There's some potential here with agility, but I do just think it's a bit too much setup, and unfortunately this Pokemon is not great in Gen 9 OU, and doesn't really have anywhere to exist. This is a textbook example of what a BL Pokemon is. It's right in the middle of 2 formats' power levels, and it doesn't really fit in either. Up next, I think, would be Ceruledge. I think Ceruledge has a bit more to offer than Galarian Moltres. As a physical Ghost Fire type, it does have a pretty unique profile there, and I could see it maybe being used on certain teams, but this Pokemon does have a real uphill battle. The best way to use Ceruledge is taking advantage of its high attack and the ability Weak Armor, which upon getting hit by a physical attack, you get your defense lowered, but you gain +2 speed. And off that, you can take a hit, live with a Focus Sash, and Swords Dance to achieve a pretty threatening position. It sounds like this could be alright on hyper offense teams, but this is pretty all in. It's very easy to stop as well. Not only is Weak Armor conditional on them hitting you with a physical attack, so special attacks will not activate the Weak Armor, but even if they do get the stars aligned, you play into it, give them the speed boost, they're boosted up, they're threatening threatening you. There's a lot that can go wrong for Ceruledge. Common things will just easily check it. Alamamola, Primarina, those kinds of bulky water types will just come in and you're on 1 HP and they just hit you very easily and defeat you. Also, Poltergeist seems like a great option on this. 110 power ghost move fails if the target has no held item. Most targets are going to have held items, so that's fine. But a problem with this is the prevalence of booster energy. Booster energy is a common item that automatically activates the effect of either photosynthesis or quark drive. So it's great on the Paradox Pokemon, which are very popular Pokemon. And a lot of them use this item to get some immediate value out of their ability and get a free stat boost. And that item gets consumed, so they have no held item. So if any Paradox Pokemon with booster energy comes in, so most of them, or many of them, you just have no ghost stabs. So this into like any Roaring Moon, one of the most common threats right now, is just gonna get completely destroyed. It can't hit them. They would resist the hit anyway, even if you could, but maybe you could power through sheer brute force, but you don't even have such an option. And the same applies to Raging Bolt, Iron Moth, and various others. You just cannot hit them. But that's very limiting, and it means you do in fact have to run a way worse ghost stab option to have any sort of consistent damage output, like Shadow Claw, and that's just not really great, is it? Bitter Blade is an interesting attack with a healing effect associated with it. 50% healing on a 90 power fire type move. Quite a good move, but I feel like Ceruledge would rather have something more immediately powerful. Maybe if this had like Pyro Ball or an equivalent attack, just something that hits harder. The healing can sometimes help, but not really. You want damage, and this only has 90 power in the modern times. It's just not quite good enough. At least Ceruledge has Shadow Sneak to outdo priority options that are targeting it, like Sucker Punch and Thunder Clap. You can at least sneak to play around those, and you go first, therefore canceling that effect. But any other prior move will still get you, and all you have to show for it is a pretty weak attack that you did first. Also, King Gambit resists Ghost, so you're gonna have to win 8 mind games in a row to defeat them. That's a lot to ask, and it's quite inconsistent. Same applies to Raging Bolt. You're gonna have to, at least you do threaten them more effectively, but still, it's just overall a pretty inconsistent threat that has a lot of struggles in the current metagame. And you know, why would you run this over some of those immediately powerful booster energy threats that have better offensive tools? They got more going on. They're not as conditional on the enemy playing into a mechanic like weak armor, etc. Ceruledge is not having a fun time right now for sure. And honestly, I think next is Latias. Even though this Pokemon is ranked pretty high on the Gen 9 VR relative to some of these, I don't think that the current meta has been kind to Latias, and it's actually pretty difficult to use this Pokemon. Latias does have a lot going for it. It's a classic Pokemon that was once excellent. It's got a good speed tier, it's very bulky, and it has this set right here, Calm Mind, Agility, Stored Power, Weakness, Policy. It is bulky enough to live a super effective hit and ramp from there, giving not only great offensive boosts, but making Stored Power that much scarier. Aura Sphere is nice for coverage, a fighting special attack, great against King Gambit and the dark types in general. They want to come in on Stored Power, and you can Calm Mind for even further ramping as well. It's a decent option, but it's really bad into like Ting Lu, who just completely shuts it down. It's bad into Encore users, which have been on the rise significantly. And Latias is generally struggling type-wise in this format full of fairy types, dragon types, and ghost and dark types, all threatening you. I mean, I know you do want to take a super effective hit to activate the weakness policy, but it never feels good when everything is super effective against you, regardless of what you're trying to do. Latias also struggles with its more utility sets, because your Trick Scarf Latias is an old classic, but these days Goldengo exists. Goldengo not only walls you very well, but it's immune to being hit by Trick because of Good as Gold. You can't trick this thing. In many ways, you cannot trick this thing. And Latias also has Healing Wish, but I think that is outclassed in that role by Enamorus, who is a more desirable Pokemon for aggressive teams that want to take advantage of Healing Wish. It's got a better typing, it's got better offensive options, and it can actually threaten Goldengo with Earth Power at the least, so that's something. I think Latias is pretty bad in the current format, to be honest with you. This set can still catch people off guard, perhaps work on certain hyper offense teams more so than the Ceruledge and the Moltres. It is more functional in a similar sort of role because of its bulk, and it's slightly better at setting this up, but I do think that this kind of thing is very all-in, very unreliable, and inconsistent at the moment. Up next, I think I would put Kommo-o. I think this guy is a little bit better than the previous two, just because it's a bit more unique. It has soundproof and bulletproof, which are abilities that offer unique immunity. Bulletproof makes you immune to bullet-based moves such as Shadow Ball, that's a good one, Focus Blast. And soundproof makes you immune to sound-based moves such as Boom Burst, Torch Song, even Roar. You can't be roared out, that could be good, perhaps. Roar is on the rise. And you also have Clangorous Soul, a very, very good boosting move. At the cost of 33% of your health, you get +1 to all stats. That's pretty damn interesting and can give this some snowball potential. Dragon Fighting is a unique offensive profile, and you also have a really cool move pool with a lot of unique options. So Kommo-o has probably more potential than the previous two just because you can be more creative with it. It does stand out much more, but this also is having problems. It's difficult for this to get the ball rolling. Its boosting move does cut its HP. That's never good. Its typing is not really great in this format. It is weak to Fairy ×4. That's never fun. So often to make up for that, you need to terrestrialize on this to get a better typing. This one uses Terra Normal for boom burst damage. That's an interesting idea, but having something that really needs to Terra to function is never good. It really reduces a team's flexibility. You would ideally have many things that can Terra for an advantage rather than something that sucks unless it Terras. Defensive Kommo-o used to be a thing in the past, but I think that that's been really outclassed by Great Tusk, who has a similar presence but is much better with more utility and a better typing for the role. But I don't think Kommo-o is completely unviable. It's going to be tough to use it. It's got a lot of hurdles to overcome, but it is much more unique than the previous two Pokemon mentioned here. And I could see a team with Kommo-o being alright, possibly. This is a really cool Pokemon design-wise, in my opinion. Love the way it looks, love all of its different options and traits. It is really unique. It has some cool abilities too that offer unique forms of immunity, so I think this Pokemon has some potential, but it's never really going to be an OU mainstay or anything in the current format. It is a bit hostile towards Kommo-o. Up next is Iron Boulder, who is actually voted by fans as the greatest Pokemon name in human history. I believe it was Charles Dickens came up with the name in collaboration with Game Freak. He did that pro bono. They didn't even ask him to. He just came on and said, "This guy's name, Iron Boulder." And the world shook to its very core. Iron Boulder is Future Terrakion. It's Rock Psychic type instead of Rock Fighting, which is a worse typing. Psychic typing is not very desirable in the modern world because of Ghost and Dark weakness and Bug weakness being such a problem. But Iron Boulder does have the benefit of being the fastest Quark Drive or Photosynthesis Pokemon in the game. It's very fast with a speed stat of base 124, which you can then boost on top of that. So Iron Boulder can be a good form of speed control, outrunning other Pokemon that have been boosted by the booster energy. Even Iron Valiant, Iron Moth. You're going to be faster and threaten them significantly. Iron Boulder also has the move Mighty Cleave, which is a rare, great rock-type physical move. This has 95 power and 100 accuracy. That's damn good, and it also bypasses protection. The move Protect will not stop this attack. That's very good against enemies like Gliscor or other Pokemon that want to stall a little bit with Protect. You can just power through that. This has the great rock-ground coverage combo. You even have close combat for further coverage. So this is a decent one. This one's not completely terrible. In fact, it's quite functional. You will see it from time to time. The issue with this and why it's probably ranked UUBL is just because it does have a lot of competition from other Photosynthesis or Quark Drive threats. I think the big ones are Iron Valiant and Roaring Moon just tend to be more desirable. Even though Iron Valiant is a bit slower, it's fast enough to outrun most things in the format, and it just has way more tools. It has so much more coverage, so much more utility with Encore. It even has stuff like Destiny Bond. It has mixed stats, so it can be great on both sides of the attacking spectrum, and its typing is actually pretty decent defensively. Even though the Pokemon's stats aren't the best on the defensive side, it has the Dragon immunity, so many good resistances. Fairy Fighting is really good. So Iron Valiant is just going to fit better more often than Iron Boulder. Iron Moth, for some teams, is a great late game cleaner with its great offensive traits to it. And Roaring Moon is the go-to explosive offensive physical attacker with knockoff and that hard-hitting acrobatics. So Iron Boulder has a lot of competition from all of those, and generally it's the less used, lesser desirable one. It's a bit more one-dimensional, it's more vulnerable with its defensive typing, and it's a little bit more difficult to fit on teams. But that doesn't make it completely terrible. It will have times where it is the best paradox threat that you can throw onto a team because of its speed tier, or perhaps because of the Mighty Cleave power, and you just want this kind of offensive threat. Iron Boulder, it could be the one for you. Decent Pokemon. all things considered. But it is pretty bad into common stuff as well compared to other threats. Like, it's just terrible into UnderUsed Therian. It can struggle to break through even Great Tusk. It's hard to fit Zen headbutt coverage on this. You probably want to run this set right here with close combat, so that can be tough. A lot of stuff can just live a hit from this, so it suffers in that sense as well. But sometimes this guy can have its day. Up next, you've got Iron Hands, an interesting Pokemon. This guy was popular in the very early metagame, and it's got a lot going for it. Electric Fighting, quite a good type combo. It has incredible stats, extraordinarily bulky with such high HP. Enormous attack, 140 base. Hits like a... Someone in the comments kept saying that I say that things hit like a truck, so it hits like something else. It hits like a horse. Iron Hands hits like a baseball bat. And it, honestly, really, really good defense considering how high the HP is. So the defensive stats are incredible. The physical attack is unbelievable. And you have a lot of good coverage. You've got the elemental punches. You've got close combat for raw power, drain punch for sustain. I think Iron Hands has always suffered from competition from Great Tusk though. A similar bulky fighting type who is faster, more utility, checks more things, higher damage output as well sometimes. But Iron Hands does have some options that stand out. Iron Hands is a little bit better into King Gambit in terms of directly switching in because you resist both Dark and Steel and you shrug off other coverage from King Gambit. What's nice about Iron Hands too is that it will cover King Gambit terastallizing flying because you hit them with electric stabs. So Iron Hands can operate quite well as a King Gambit check, which is very, very valuable. Just that alone will give Iron Hands a decent amount of value per game. Just being able to stop King Gambit in its tracks so well. In sets like Sugarberry, Iron Hands are able to lure UnderUsed Therian and hit them with an Ice Punch. Great Tusk does not get Drain Punch, so that's an advantage Iron Hands has. As a bulky win condition, Iron Hands is going to be a little bit better in that sense. And Iron Hands can also take good advantage of the Punching Glove item, which is actually quite a good fit in the format right now. Punching Glove buffs punch-based attacks, which, take a look at the moveset right here, it's all punch-based attacks. They get a little power boost, and they don't make contact. And that is the key that makes this really cool, is because some Pokemon already run Protective Pads, which is an item that just has the effect of not making contact. But the fact that you get a damage boost and this contact immunity is very good. Pokemon like Moltres love to come in and spread Flame Body Burn, which burns on contact 30% of the time. Rocky Helmet is everywhere. Static from Zapdos and other such contact effects, maybe Rough Skin on certain Pokemon, will be completely dodged by this Iron Hands, and that is pretty fantastic. UnderUsed Therian is commonly running a Rocky Helmet, so is Corviknight. So Iron Hands actually threatens many of the common physical checks in the format that deal with Great Tusk. Moltres, pretty damn good into Great Tusk, so is Zapdos, but Iron Hands is going to threaten both of those Pokemon, not only because it's not caring about the contact effect that they possess, but got super effective coverage boosted by the Punch of Glove too. So Iron Hands has that little niche for itself, and that has gotten better as those mechanics and those Pokemon have been on the rise. UnderUsed T with Rocky Helmet, pretty common. Moltres, also pretty common these days. So that's a genuine, really cool niche Iron Hands has over Great Tusk. That said, I would be surprised to see Iron Hands rise up to OU proper again. It's just not the kind of thing that you throw on every team. It's pretty specific, but this is a good set of traits, and it's a pretty solid Pokemon overall. Up next, I'm going to go with Pelipper here. Pelipper is an interesting Pokemon because it is the defining Pokemon on rain teams. It has the ability Drizzle, which sets rain. So obviously, this is the whole centerpiece of the rain archetype. It might be surprising to see such an important concept ranked in UUBL. Rain is usually really good. Rain teams usually have some place in the format, and therefore Pelipper ends up in OU. And it has been OU in the past. But at the moment, Rain is in a very, very bad place. Rain is really suffering against Ogerpon Wellspring, who is an extremely popular top threat that is completely immune to water, and also punishes popular Rain Pokemon with its Grass Stab. It also doesn't help that this shrugs off the common ice coverage many rain threats are using to hit their usual counterplay. And if you lock into like a Choice Band water move against Ogerpon Wellspring, it's going to completely reverse the situation and destroy you. So Ogerpon Wellspring is a disaster for rain teams. Raging Bolt doesn't help either. It's got the priority electric move, which can punish Swiftsome Pokemon like Barraskewda. Like, yes, they outrun you, but they're going to get destroyed by the Thunderclap. And that's not very good. The Rain has been having a tough go, but I'm going to give Pelipper some respect for being that archetypical rain Pokemon. I mean, it has a vital role. And also, Rainstalk might be on the rise because of Palafin. Palafin recently got unbanned. And Palafin is, of course, a fantastic choice on rain teams. with its powerful Jet Punch. And maybe Palafin is going to be the one that lures in and eliminates Ogerpon Wellspring. It has Acrobatics, which is a way to hit Ogerpon Wellspring super effectively. The Palafin might be something that actually brings Rain together and returns it back to relevance. Who knows? Palafin doesn't match up very well into Raging Bolt, but maybe there's some adaptation there too. You got Ice Punch, you got Terra, you got whatever. Palafin could be the way. And with Palafin back in the format, perhaps Rain will return to form a little bit. We'll have to see. And up next, you've got Blaziken, a Pokemon that was once so powerful it had to be banned in Gen 5. But things are very different now. Blaziken is UUBL, not that popular on offensive teams, which is kind of surprising. But when you think about it, it does start to make sense. Blaziken has a lot going for it. Swords Dance Speed Boost is an incredible combo with double ramping and free speed gain that you can take advantage of by just clicking Protect. Such a safe way to boost up. You also have great stab types, Fire and Fighting, with hard hitting options including Close Combat and Flare Blitz. I mean, there's a reason this was banned back in Gen 5. It was incredibly overwhelming. But in the modern Gen 9 OU metagame, a lot can stop this in its tracks. Zamazenta's in the format now, and Zamazenta comes in with a defense boost. It commonly runs Roar these days, so it can get rid of it that way, and it could just hit you with Body Press and just one-shot you. Blaziken is recoiling itself with the Flare Blitz and Life Orb, so that is inconsistent. If you attack into a Rocky Helmet Pokemon, you're having a tough time. Great Tusk walls this pretty well, and Great Tusk is everywhere. It's incredibly common. It has high defense. It can live a +2 stab option and just KO you back, and then the wind is really out of your sails there. And also Landorus Therian puts a stop to this pretty effectively, intimidating it, living a hit, KOing back with a super effective move, and even chipping you down with Rocky Helmet as well. Blaziken just isn't really a good fit in the format, or at least it's not as overwhelmingly broken as it once was, with many things that can respond to it and stop it in its tracks. That being said though, Blaziken can still be a great choice on offensive teams. I mean, you are luring in those specific Pokemon, which are great to lure in. All those Pokemon have limited healing, and luring in something like Zamazenta, chunking it with a huge stab move can be a path forward for an offensive team, an HO team. Or maybe conversely, some of your other teammates are doing the same, luring in those Pokemon, wearing them down so that Blaziken can clean up in an end game. On the right HO team, this can just be one of many threats aiming to break through with overwhelming power, and it can achieve this on the right contexts. But it is competing in this role with the Paradox Pokemon and other powerful boost sweepers like Dragonite, different Terra abusers, different hyper offense threats, many of which are more desirable. So Blaziken does have its place on certain offense teams. It's much better than many of the BL Pokemon here, but still it's got a lot of problems in the format, and that makes it a little bit difficult to fit on teams, and therefore not ranked OU by usage. Up next is Garchomp, a Pokemon that is kind of insane to see in UUBL. This has been an OU mainstay ever since its inception. In fact, when it was introduced, it was too powerful. It's Ubers in Gen 4, and OU in every other gen except Gen 9, where it finally fell down. Not popular enough to be OU proper. But it's not all bad for Garchomp. Of all these BL Pokemon, Garchomp is one of the better ones, actually. And it can still function somewhat well in a specific role. It is kind of sad to see what Garchomp has become, because the best thing Garchomp has going for it is this set right here, a bulky hazard setting set. Garchomp got access to spikes in Gen 9, was a nice buff. And the best way to use Garchomp in Gen 9 is with this set right here, stacking Rough Skin and Rocky Helmet on top of each other for that residual damage. If you make contact with Garchomp, you're going to hit yourself twice. So Garchomp can rack up some serious chip damage with that. You also have Dragon Tail to shuffle things around and force switches, has some defensive value against sweepers, and also just racks up hazard damage as you force things in. And yeah, you got Stealth Rock and Spikes and Earthquake. This is sharing some space with Ting Lu, who is generally better defensively, bulkier, and can wall more things, can check more things. But Garchomp is okay in this role because it is a little bit more aggressive. It has the chip damage from Rough Skin and Rocky Helmet, which can really help. And your defensive profile is different. Dragon Ground is a decent defensive typing with some different qualities. You're neutral to water and grass rather than being weak to them like Ting Lu is. And you resist fire as well. That's nice sometimes. Garchomp can at least probably live a hit from Ogerpon Wellspring and Dragon Tail it out, I suppose, because it's not weak to water or grass. That maybe that'll come up. And many things like to target Ting Lu with fighting coverage, but Garchomp is not weak to fighting, so that could come in handy. You never know. I mean, spike stacking is very powerful in Gen 9 because of Goldengo. And Goldengo can block all forms of hazard removal, or most of them, most relevant ones. So a Pokemon like Garchomp has its place as a hazard stacker.
here. But it's a bit of a shame that all of its set variety of the past, all the offensive sets and mixed coverage are kind of unviable now in the modern day, and it's relegated just to this role. It's seeing a Titan fall down, but it's not all bad for Garchomp. Compared to other UUBLs, it's still rather viable. Up next is Ursaluna, a former OU Pokemon that did get demoted. It's not the most popular thing on the planet, but I do think this is one of the better UUBL Pokemon that is seen in tournaments a decent amount, and nothing can quite match the sheer damage output of this Pokemon. It's a normal ground type with the ability Guts, a famously great offensive ability, granting 1.5x attack if you are statist. And with a Flame Orb, you of course self-inflict burn to activate this effect. And look at the stats. Similar to that of Iron Hands actually, you have just enormous HP attack and defense stats. Incredibly bulky, incredibly powerful. But the difference is that Ursaluna just has way more damage output from its attacks. It has Facade, which gets double power if you're statist, which you are. Coming out to 140 power with Stab, and a Swords Dance boost, this is going to destroy various things. Headlong Rush has 120 power with Ground Stab, and Fire Punch is of course here to hit Corviknight. And other steel types trying to come in, perhaps a Goldango with a balloon thinks it's safe and is in for a rude awakening. Ursaluna does suffer from competition from other ground types. Great Tusk is of course generally easier to fit on teams, but Ursaluna is not exactly the same as Great Tusk, and in some areas it's much better. In the world of sheer damage output, this is going to be your best bulky ground type physical breaker in the tier, probably. This is the one. And this is a great one. Up next is Hoopa Unbound, a mythical Pokemon who is ranked in the UUBL tier. This guy's been banned in the past. It's on the surface extremely powerful, with unbelievable stats comparable to that of legendaries, with enormous attack and special attack, great bulk as well. But it suffers immensely from its Psychic Dark type combination, which is ×4 weak to Bug. That's an absolute travesty because U-turn is everywhere. It's going to deal monstrous damage to you. You're also weak to Fairy, which is never fun in today's world. But Hoopa Unbound, despite that crippling typing, is still pretty damn good in Gen 9 OU, and this one I could maybe see rising up because it is quite nice with this new development of the Assault Vest Hoopa Unbound, because it combines defense and offense very well. Assault Vest gives Hoopa Unbound the ability to check important things, and it can break at the same time with its just incredible base stance. You don't even need investment to pose a threat. You're knocking off to spread item removal, and Psychic Noise was an incredible addition, which is a Psychic Stab option and a special attack that also prevents the target from healing. So this can 1v1 even incredibly bulky special walls. Even like Blissey is not going to love this. And Blissey's getting obviously threatened by knockoff and Drain Punch too, but they can't even heal against you. Various things can't even heal against you now. And then Thunderbolt is great coverage as well for all the water and flying types running around. Corviknight, Alomomola, Dondozo even. So Hoopa Unbound, this set is not only like actually doing pretty well into common special threats, like think Iron Moth, they're not breaking through this. Darkrai is going to have troubles breaking through this too. And on top of that, you are destroying stall teams or any balanced team or greedy team whatsoever. They can't heal, all their items are getting destroyed. I hope that nobody runs Muck and faces against this. It's going to, yes, it'll be immune to Sticky Hold knockoff, but Psychic Noise against the Muck is going to do psychic damage. That's not going to be very fun for anybody. This is pretty damn good. This is pretty damn good. It does suffer significantly from the typing, and that's the biggest drawback. That's what makes it hard to fit on teams and low usage, probably. But the way this meta is going towards more fast-paced offensive stuff, maybe this could be good enough to actually be maybe on the lower end of the OU usage, like 5-point-something%. You never know. I think it has potential. I think it's quite solid in the current meta game and quite consistent at what it wants to do. Up next is Okidogi. It's been said that every dog has its day, and it's certainly true in this case. When this guy first came out, I thought it would suck. I thought it'd be in like NU, but this guy has really impressed me and everyone else. Has become a pretty popular and a consistent Pokemon. Kind of feels similar to what Annihilate felt like before, as a bulky fighting type with the bulk up Drain Punch combo, but it serves different defensive purpose with poison fighting typing, and that's really nice into like Iron Valiant and other fairy threats, and it grants poison immunity, and you have poison stab to hit fairy types. The ability Guard Dog is pretty nice in a world where Landorus Therian is on the rise, because it's immunity to Intimidate, and if you do get intimidated, you get +1 attack. So Landorus Therian isn't just coming in and beating this. Maybe you bulk up with this, giving yourself enough defense to relive the Earthquake and Ice Punch, or maybe you just straight up Ice Punch them on the way in. And if they do come in, you're going to receive an attack boost, and that's going to KO. Having access to knockoff is also enormous. If you think of similar Pokemon, even in UUBL, that have a role comparable to Okidogi, probably Iron Hands is the biggest analog. Iron Hands can't really make long-term progress with any of its moves, but knockoff is such a good option, doubling as dark coverage and item removal in one. It's incredible to have, and it means Okidogi can come in defensively and really punish whatever comes in by getting rid of its item permanently. And it complements fighting coverage incredibly well. Okidogi also has another ability that's worth using, and that is Toxic Chain, which grants 30% chance to inflict toxic poison on all of your attacks, and that is obviously pretty damn fantastic, especially knockoff. Imagine knockoff removing an item and toxicking you at the same time. It's kind of unbelievable. But there's Assault Vest Okidogi is a pretty good set. I mean, this is pretty great into Darkrai. You resist Dark. They commonly run Sludge Bomb for coverage too. So you come in and you're getting pretty significant momentum back as every switch in is hating their life, getting maybe knocked off or poisoned or whatever. This would be pretty good into like Primarina, Clefable, Iron Valiant as well. The Okidogi right here has a lot going for it, and this is one of the ones that I could see just straight up rising to OU in the future. There's a great chance it could, because it actually is strong into common Pokemon. It's effective at what it does. It is consistently good, and it's not that hard to fit onto teams either. It fits with the pace of the format. It's aggressive and defensive in one. I think that this could be a contender for an OU riser in the future. And I do think it is the best Pokemon currently ranked in UUBL. What a great underdog story this is. A Pokemon we all thought would suck is perhaps going to become a metagame staple in the future. What a turn of events that is. And that is every single BL ranked Pokemon in Gen 9 at the moment. And as I've said, I think many of these will just be stuck in the limbo forever. It's an unfortunate thing that happens sometimes. Not every Pokemon will have a home, and we can't brute force every Pokemon to have a home. This is just a natural occurrence and an unfortunate occurrence when it does happen. But as I've said, many of these Pokemon do have unique traits that give them niche roles, and some are just straight up good in the format and may even rise up to actual OU status in the future. Something like Pelipper, depending on how good the rain threats are, can rise up. Okidogi here, I think, has proven itself to be very strong, consistent, and popular in tournaments, and I would not be surprised to see this rise to OU in the future. But what do you think, folks? Have I overrated or underrated any of these? Am I too optimistic about the dog? Or am I appropriately optimistic towards the dog? Let me know. And thank you as always for watching.